Today's video is brought to you by Tiege Hanley. In today's video, we answer the question, which race was the strongest in the Third Age during the time of the War of the Ring? The only requirement for consideration is that the respective group or faction should still inhabit Middle-earth at the time of the Lord of the Rings. One thing to keep in mind though, this topic may not have a definitive answer, and we are more curious to explore the relative strength of the factions present rather than rank each over the other, and vice versa. So let's jump into it.
Build me an army worthy of Mordor.
Hello and welcome to The Broken Sword, your home for Lord of the Rings and all things concerning Tolkien and the world he created. Please take the time to like the video, subscribe to the channel, all the great stuff, so you can stick around with us for more future content. To begin, part of what makes the Fellowship of the Ring so memorable and lovable is its diverse cast of characters. Those who make up that group reflect the variety of peoples within Middle-earth. We have 4 hobbits: Frodo, Sam, Merry and Pippin; an elf, Legolas, the son of Thranduil; a dwarf, Gimli, son of Gloin; 2 men, Aragorn of the Dunedain and Boromir of Gondor; and last, but certainly not least among them, Gandalf the Grey, a powerful Maya and guide for the first leg of their journey before he was separated during his fight against Durin's Bane. Of this group, it is easy to name the mightiest individuals, though it is possible that would be missing the point. No one faction, race, or individual is up to the task of individually taking on Sauron and the might of Mordor. It is only by means of cooperation and indeed through fellowship that the will of Sauron can be overcome. This means that the ancient enmities that exist between these groups, such as the Elves and the Dwarves, the Dunedain and Gondor, these past grievances must be put aside for the common good and future of their world. But even if it doesn't come down to just power, then what about who is the strongest skincare routine? Well, that is where today's sponsor, Tiege Hanley, can help. They have helped me start and maintain a skincare routine by making the entire process uncomplicated. Honestly, it's the best skincare system for guys like you and me. I recommend you start with the level 1 system, which comes with all the basics. You would get a daily face wash to get rid of the dirt and grime on your skin, a 2 times per week exfoliating scrub to get rid of dead skin cells, an AM moisturizer with SPF 20 because you should always be protecting your skin from the sun, and a PM moisturizer to help your skin stay hydrated and healthy throughout the night. My favourite part about Tiege Hanley is that every box comes with an instruction card that tells you when to use each product, how much to use, and in what order too. They really make the process of achieving and maintaining amazing skin easy. Their products have made my skin look and feel better than ever, going from Gollum to Legolas in how I feel. But you don't have to just take my word for it. They have over 5,000 5-star reviews on their website from satisfied customers from all over the world. In addition to amazing skin, members of Tiege Hanley get tons of benefits too, including at least 20% off the retail price, the ability to customize your box, exclusive monthly deals, pause or cancel at any time, and free US shipping and low-cost shipping elsewhere. And because Tiege Hanley is sponsoring today's video, they're offering all of you guys, as my viewers, a great deal. Just click the first link in the description and you'll get 30% off your first box, plus a free gift too. And who doesn't like a free gift? So don't miss out on this amazing deal, click that link and get started today. While it is easy to name the most powerful race in the First Age, with the obvious answer being that of the Elves, and though the Second Age might be a bit more complicated with the majesty and greatness that would become Numenor and the flourishing of their civilization, at the beginning of the Third Age, the situation and relative strength of the different races is not so simple. Foremost is the issue of the Elves, who were leaving Middle-earth at this time. Though men were in decline as well, Sauron gathered his forces once more, and though the greatness of Numenor was long forgotten by many in the world, there were Easterlings, the Rohirrim, and the answer appears to be spelled out throughout the Lord of the Rings to our question. The Elves were sailing west, and it was the will of Eru Ilúvatar that the time would come when the Elves would depart the world, and this would give way to the Age of Men. In the final analysis, though, there were still Elves of great influence and power in Middle-earth during the events of the War of the Ring. Their greatness had long been waning, and the Age of Men had been rapidly approaching. We learn that in the aftermath of the War of the Ring, Aragorn the King set about remarking and setting to right the wrongs as best that he could, ordering his newly reunited kingdom to be one of peace. One of the most important acts as king was the freeing of the slaves, the peoples of Nirn, those whom Sauron had used to work the lands which surrounded the Sea of Nirnen. These vast grain fields were entirely given over to slave labour, and Aragorn's attention to this speaks highly of the prospects of his new kingdom and to the potential of his peoples as the Third Age waned, as the Elves continued to sail away into the west, and the Dwarves, while they delved ever deeper into the earth. It is possible that Sauron's influence might depart that land and the Fourth Age might be kinder to the peoples of the East, not least among them the former slaves of the Nirn, but also the Easterlings, who might yet be great when freed of the influence of the Dark Lord. To that point, the Easterlings were always assumed to have a great power, though little is ever really said or known about their specific kingdoms or the strength of them in general. Over the course of this age of warfare, we get to see a number of factions rise up and fall from power in their regions. As the power of individual factions grew, of them we must mention Angmar though. In 1409 of the Third Age, Angmar took control of Rhudaur and attacked Cardolan, destroying every settlement in the kingdom except for the Barrow Downs and Tharbad. When Sauron was defeated in the War of the Last Alliance, the Dunedain were free for a time from the shadow. But the Lord of the Nazgul, the Witch King, came into the northern reach of the Misty Mountains and founded Angmar, from which he would assault and wage war against the Dunedain of the north, and he would manage to take the greater part of Arnor, Rhudaur. In the years to follow, he would attempt to further divide the kingdom of Arnor by conquering the lesser realms of also Cardolan and Arthedain too. Sauron would return soon afterwards, and the Witch King would continue their wars against the men of Arthedain and Cardolan. They would only survive for a time while Sauron lurked in Mirkwood. The realm of Angmar here was great in strength, and more so than the then scattered kingdoms of men. The kingdom of Gondor would be brought to a lower point when the plague hit its lands, and also this, when its last king, Eomer, was baited by the Witch King by taunts of cowardice. The king of Gondor at this time left his crown behind and entered Minas Morgul, once the Tower of Ithil, now the Tower of Black Sorcery, and he would not return. He thought he was going to fight the Witch King in single combat, but to trust such an evil being was a grave mistake. In the aftermath, Gondor would come to be governed by the line of the Stewards, and the great White Tree of Gondor would bloom less and less in the years that followed as the line of kings was broken. Angmar would remain the biggest player in the West for generations before Mordor would exert its might once more during the events of The Lord of the Rings. In the year 1974 of the Third Age, Arthedain was destroyed, which was the last of the lands of Elendil. The capital of Arthedain at Fornost, which had survived the first siege with the aid of the Elves, not least among them Círdan the Shipwright and Lord Elrond of Rivendell, and also most prominently, Glorfindel. It was in fact he who gave that famous statement that the Witch King would not be slain by a man, and well, we all know how that ended. So we can see how the kingdom of Arnor was in great decline, lessening the power of the colonists of Númenor on this continent. The remnants of the Dunedain of Arnor would remain though, and that remnant of them would become the Rangers of the North. But as a people, their power was not great of numbers. Individually, they were strong men. I mean, you had the likes of Aragorn and his forefathers within them. But as a whole, they couldn't exactly take over a realm. Arthedain alone of the petty kingdoms of the Broken Arnor kept the Shards of Narsil and formed the captains of the Rangers. But again, it is a question here of their numbers. The Witch King's power was only a preamble to the return of Sauron, whose might towards the end of the Third Age would drag the whole of the continent into war. The War of the Rings is waged by Sauron, who is not yet at full strength, which speaks to the strength of Sauron. Without his full might, he is on the knife's edge of bringing the world under his boot. If not for the destruction of his ring, it is possible he may have done so. After the Witch King was defeated and Angmar fell, Dol Guldur was steadily gathering strength with the unknown menace that was Sauron, although hidden as the Necromancer. With the arrival of the Eotheod and their settlements along the Anduin River, they would rise in power and drive out the remainder of the forces of Angmar and settle in Framsburg, a city which would endure until it was abandoned in 2509, and this group of people travelled southward to Calenardon, the prelude to the foundation and rise of the Horse Lords of Rohan. Rohan and the Rohirrim were a different class of men. They would be the greatest allies of the weakened Gondor in its time under the rule of the stewards in the later Third Age. The Rohirrim were the best horsemen, but the realm of Gondor was roughly 3 times that of Rohan. Rohan would grow in strength from this point, though it would be another kingdom that would be brought to a lower point by the mechanisms of evil. Saruman the Wizard acted against Rohan, though his methods are different in the books. In the writings, Wormtongue is sent to ensure that Theoden would take no action against Saruman and the orcs travelling across Rohan, or from otherwise mobilising any military force. After Gandalf brought this plot to light, Saruman and Wormtongue would be revealed, but as we see with Gondor in the late Third Age, the Rohirrim are just a shadow of what they had been. Even though we here at The Broken Sword absolutely love the film trilogy, we must count it among Peter Jackson's true sins, the handling of Denethor, the Steward of Gondor. The events which preceded the downfall of Gondor had more to do with plague and civil war than any individual steward or king, though the abandoned throne must have had an impact on the cohesion of the kingdom and its strength. When it comes to Denethor, we must remember that his portrayal in the films is so unlike the character in the book, they may as well have been different characters. Though Gondor was at its lowest, it was not for want of effort on behalf of Denethor. Denethor strove mightily against Sauron for decades before the contest of wills with him finally exhausted the man. By the end of the Third Age, the future seemed brighter for the lands east of Mordor and for the Easterlings. Their strength has often been tied to that of Mordor, and for that reason, it's not proper to count their power individually, as it was part of the greater strength that was Sauron's army in the late Third Age. One of the many themes at play throughout The Lord of the Rings and the greater legendarium is the rise and then the fall of powers. Whether they be the forces of Mordor or of an ancient Eldar, at some point a given group will be brought lower, and once ancient, powerful groups will cease to exist. The reunified kingdoms of Arnor and Gondor under the most powerful kingdom at the end of the Third Age, under the new High King Elessar, will, itself, someday fall too. It is not a question of if, but when. Same can be said of the Dwarves, who were the mightiest of warriors in terms of physical strength, yet by the time of The Lord of the Rings in the late Third Age, their strength as a group had waned from what it once was. Though there were other settlements east of Mordor, such as Rhûn, Harad, and Karnd, we know that Rhûn is great in antiquity, since it was there that elves, men, and dwarves awoke, and throughout its long history, surely it has seen countless kings, tribal chieftains, and high civilizations, only that we know less about them but for the focus of our story. What we know is that the combined forces of the East, with those back in Sauron and the forces of Mordor, were together the strongest realm of Middle-earth until the culmination of the War of the Ring. At that time, the dominion of men was ready, and we had the new High King willing to begin the remaking of these formerly great, formerly powerful realms. At the time of the War of the Ring, the men were the greatest in strength of the races of Middle-earth. But it is not that simple, as many were divided along political and cultural lines. If we look at an individual for a moment, maybe for the Dwarves, then someone like Dain Ironfoot has to be one of the greatest warriors to ever live, but alone there would be little for him to do. But Dain is such an awesome character. Please let us know in the comments below if you would like to have a video looking more at this legendary dwarven warrior. But talking of the dwarves, the war of the dwarves and orcs was won by the dwarves, but it was at such a great cost. They lost half of their army in a very Pyrrhic victory that cost their civilization dearly and led directly to their lessening as the Third Age moved on, meaning by the time of the War of the Ring, their power was nothing compared to what it had once been. Of course, there were the Dwarves of Erebor, whose might had been great, but the death of their chieftains in the Great Wars of the Dwarves and the Orcs, their power, that of older generations when Belagost and Nogrod were in their might, battles with the likes of the Longworm Scather, and later with the Firedrake Smaug too, all of these would bring these lower times to the Dwarves. While men were undoubtedly the strongest race remaining in Middle-earth by the end of The Lord of the Rings. Of course, this would not be the case had not the Elves decided to go into the West. With Elrond's passing into the West at the end of the Age, it marks the passing of the last great vestige of Elvish power in the realms of Middle-earth, making room for the second-born of Eru Ilúvatar to come into their own, to make way for the dominion of men. The Elves of Lothlorien too would pass, as Galadriel tells Frodo in the Mirror of Galadriel that their coming is for her the coming of doom, as if the Fellowship should succeed, it means that the realm of Lothlorien should fade. This video focuses on the most powerful races and why they could be considered as such at the time of The Lord of the Rings. An analysis of the greatest powers of Arda is different depending on the time period, and to look at the most powerful in any era would change the picture completely. Just consider the realms of the Falas and Lothlorien under the leaderships of Círdan the Shipwright and Galadriel the Lady of Light respectively. They were given back to nature. Of the remaining Elvish realms of power at the time of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, there were undoubtedly those in Mirkwood too, the Sylvan Elves of King Thranduil, the father of Legolas, and one of the few of the elves of antiquity from the House of Oropher to remain in Middle-earth. He is from the First Age and thus extremely long-lived, still able to field a respectable army as we do see in The Hobbit. Though the elves show up at the Battle of the Hornburg or Helm's Deep in the movies, this is not so in the books. They just didn't have the same kind of numbers to do this. There was still a war in the north to fight, and they couldn't give soldiers to those in the south as well. Again, a big thing comes down to the numbers that they possessed, and really how that stops them from being the most powerful of the races. And so, as our story comes to an end, we have to say, men are in the might of their youth. Yet, as we have seen over and over, this is never long in lasting. Power is not one's own. In Tolkien's world, that strength that comes to the people and beings of Middle-earth is only borrowed, and for a time. In truth, it would fade before long anyway. The time of the Elves came to an end, and the heralding of the Fourth Age was that of the reunification and the strengthening of the kingdoms of men, for as long as it lasts, that is. Of the other elves, there were also the Falathrim, who lived along the western shores of Middle-earth under the lordship of Círdan, but they too would leave Middle-earth, making a home in the Grey Havens before their final voyage to the Undying Lands. At the end of the day, we can see the elves were fading, the dwarves dug deeper, but men were taking their time now. Yes, you had some who followed more evil lines, but still the race of men were there. With the dark power of Sauron fading and light being given back to these groups, hopefully putting a stop to the evil there, it shows that altogether the race of men must truly have been the strongest race during the Lord of the Rings. It's just a shame, but because they fought on both sides, that's why the war was closer than it may have been. You may also realise that I haven't mentioned the hobbits in this video, but you know, they're people of peace. They could barely take on a few ruffians, so I don't think they're really much of a discussion for this grander question. Not that I wouldn't like to see an army of hobbits taking on the best of them. So with that, now it is time for my question of the day, which is, if it did come down to a battle royale styled fight, all of the men together, all of the elves, all of the dwarves, all of the hobbits, maybe even all of the orcs that remained, which race do you think would come out on top? Let me know all of your thoughts and theories on this in the comment section below. And now it is time to shout out our patrons. You guys have been amazing in supporting our short film project, and we are making good progress, and I cannot thank you all enough. We have the Divine Power tier members of Kevin and Abram, the Fire Demon tier members of Nashith, Denversteel and Gregory, and the Wizard Staff tier members of John, Andrew, Jennifer, and Hunter. You are all true legends of the Bro Hero. Finally, if you've managed to reach the very end of this video with me today and you are enjoying what you see on the channel, please hit that subscribe button with the bell icon too, so that you can be notified of all of our future uploads. And thanks again to today's sponsor, Tej Hanley. Do not forget to check out the link in the description below for 30% off of your first box. And so, thank you once again for spending just some of your time with me today, and I will see you next time on The Broken Sword.